Hi everybody, my name is Reed Kruger and this is for PRM360. In this audiovisual display I will be speaking on Mount Elden, the wildfires, plants, and animals that have occurred and that you can find throughout this environment as a whole. When it comes to wildfires, two main contributing factors will be weather and humans. The weather, it really just depends on the factors, precipitation, humidity, and the temperature itself as a whole, along with wind conditions. Those all working together can create immense damage, can cause all sorts of fires to lose control and cause thousands upon millions of acres damaged. In 2018, we had a total of 8.6 million acres burned. 90% of these acres that were burned were human started. They were human causes. Throughout Arizona, we've seen many fires. As I mentioned earlier, we had seen a total of 826 fires within Arizona alone in 2017. Throughout this presentation, I'll be speaking on Mount Elden, specifically the radio fire of 1977, the damage it caused, and the varying plants and animals within the Mount Elden environment. History of Mount Elden is quite interesting. It started with the early Anglo settlers in the late 19th century. A man named John Elden, along with his community, chose Mount Elden as their home for the great spots of grazing and the great community sense that they could establish. Located in Flagstaff, Arizona at 7,500 feet, Mount Elden rises to around 9,300 feet, give or take. This is within the Coconino National Forest. The mountain's exposed, rocky slopes are a dominant feature for almost any part of Flagstaff. Almost at any angle, you can acknowledge and visibly see Mount Elden. Rising nearly 2,400 feet in elevation, the Mount Elden journey is quite steep and quite extensive. It doesn't take all too long to get to the top, but it does require some grit, seeing as how the elevation increases very, very quickly. Because of our Forest Service, we have well-maintained roads, motorized and non-motorized roads, that will lead us right to the trailhead in which this hike begins. The radio fire of 1977 occurred 42 years ago. It was said to look as if it was a Christmas tree that was on fire, beautiful yet a horrific sight to see. It was a simple campfire that was left unattended that got out of control and set ablaze 5,000 acres among Mount Elden. 40 years later, we're still struggling to readapt and to regrow the ecosystem within that environment. Now we're going to speak about Mount Elden foliage. On this slide here, we can see a ponderosa pine on the left and an alligator juniper on the right. Now there are two differences between these two trees that will help you identify which is which. One being the bark on both the trees, and the second being the bud at the end of the branches on both the trees. Now the bark on the ponderosa pine is a bit lighter shade and longer in strips. The alligator juniper has a scaly effect throughout the entire trunk. The bark itself looks as if it's in pieces of squares, and the bark itself on the ponderosa pine looks more elongated. Now the buds and blossoms on the ends of each tree vary. The alligator juniper has a more bushing blossom, and it tends to protrude out a bit more, whereas the ponderosa pine has a bit more pine needles and the elongated needle effect. The aspen trees are typically found at a higher elevation. Now, when ascending Mount Elden, you'll typically see aspens in the later half of the hike. What gives away an aspen is the sheer white, paper-like bark that you'll see on these trees. The yucca plant itself is thought to be grown only in desert settings and only in lower elevation settings, when in all reality, yuccas definitely can grow within the more arid and higher elevation settings. Um, they have long sword-shaped leaves with pointed tips. The leaves are often about 1 to 3 feet in length. Numerous yucca leaves grow in a rosetta formation to form a thick base. Cliff roses are most often found between 3,500 feet and 8,000 feet. They can be located in the Rockies, the Southwest, the Great Basin regions, and into Mexico. Being that it's found between 3,500 and 8,000 feet, the cliff rose can be found on the first half of the hike up Mount Elden. Cliff roses have many branches and they're considered a shrub. These shrubs can grow up to 8 feet tall. In some ideal locations, the shrubs can reach 20 feet tall. In older shrubs, the bark splits into long, fine segments. Leaves are tiny, about a half an inch long, and are mostly five-lobed. The leaves are covered with tiny, granular dotted hairs that are sticky to the touch. The flowers are whitish in color and about a half to 1 inch in width. The gamble oak flowers March to April. The fruits mature in the autumn of the first year after flowering. It reproduces from seed, root sprouts, and tillers. Leaves are about 5 inches long, with 3 or 4 rounded, deeply cleft lobes on each side of the central vein. The lobe tips are smooth, without spines or teeth. Mount Elden includes a diverse and wide variety of animals that can be found in this environment. Bobcats are not easily seen in the wild due to many different things. They're small in stature and they're quite quiet. Bobcats are about twice as big as a domestic house cat. They're still small enough to weigh about 30 pounds. Bobcats are generally most active at dusk and dawn. They typically hunt between 2 to 7 miles along a regular route daily. The jackrabbit acquired its name from its 4 to 5 inch ears, resembling those of a jackass. Unlike a true rabbit, however, jackrabbits don't burrow, so they're actually a hare. In the winter, a jackrabbit's diet consists mostly of bark and buds, while these animals prefer tender grasses in the summer. In drier periods, it will eat cacti. Albert's squirrels generally spend most of their days looking for food. They spend most of their days looking for food and building nests and shelters. These nests and shelters are made of twigs and lined with grass, leaves, feathers, moss, and pieces of bark. Unlike other North American squirrels, the Albert's squirrel doesn't store its food. Gray foxes are omnivorous, feeding on both plant and animal. Although in Arizona, juniper berries are the most frequently eaten food in the spring and summer for this animal. Unlike their counterpart, the coyote, gray foxes are quite silent when they hunt. The only time they make noise is when they're obviously upset with intruders in their habitat. Rattlesnakes in this region aren't particularly aggressive, so as long as you keep your eyes open and watch where your feet and hands go, you'll be okay. Most commonly, the black rattlesnake and the timber rattlesnake come out late morning, early afternoon in order to achieve some sunbathing on warm rocks. These two animals are typically found at 6,000 feet or higher in elevation. It is best when hiking to avoid wearing sandals and shorts. I hope throughout this presentation I have encouraged you to get into the forest and enjoy the beauty it provides. Reminisce through the remnants of the radio fire and appreciate the foliage and wildlife that surrounds you. Thank you.